Okay, we're now going to come to a bit of a wrap-up of the conference. We've done this a few times now. It actually works really well. Setting expectations high. Jonathan, okay, thank you very much. Well, I won't be famous last words. But grab a seat. I'd like to welcome Jonathan and Malcolm back. Jonathan and Malcolm, as you remember, I hope you remember, and if you don't remember, we have a problem on many levels, opened up the conference yesterday. And I thought this would be a good way for us to then sort of circle back and think about some of the key learnings. Has anything changed from your presentations from yesterday morning? What would you add to them next time? Okay, in terms of ways of thinking about the market, and what surprised you? Okay, so there you go. There's some. I'll put the seeds there to think about. But let's start with the first thought. And Jonathan, as you have lots of notes there,
so I think
a cheat sheet. What's sort of been interesting for you?
So I think, you know, this is my first time in Bangkok ever, and it's the first time to PPW in Bangkok. And what really struck me, and you can look at these things from afar, but until you really kind of talk to a lot more people, you don't get a real sense of it. What struck me as a newcomer is the level of fragmentation amongst the agent base in the region, and the lack of tools, and also the challenges of trust and the problems that creates for traditional classifieds. And to me, you know, that kind of suggests there is really a very strong opportunity across these markets to create the Leandra-style platforms over time. And it feels to me that, you know, I've said for a while that I believe that Asia will get to the end point in property marketplaces, property platforms, well before Europe and America. And I think I come with I've gained a real reinforcement to that view. So that would be my kind of number one from being here for the first time.
It's a highly innovative market.
Yep.
But the incentives are lined up for that to be innovative.
Yep.
You know, it's hard to make money if you're an advertising platform in these markets. There's, you know, if you are a transaction portal and an advertising portal, it doesn't matter.
Yep.
You know, people may make a bit of noise, but it doesn't matter. There's good commissions, as we just saw in this previous presentation, of up to I think it was 10%, if I remember correctly, in the market. So there's money to be earned out there. So all the right ingredients are there, and the market is fragmented.
And the agent base is just so fragmented, you know, and the fact that it doesn't seem, as far as I can tell, to be consolidating particularly, you know, sets you up for that perfect combination of single agent and platform, which is, I think, where that environment really works best.
Yep. So. Okay, I know you've got some more in the list, but I'm going to allow Malcolm. Thoughts?
Thank you, Simon. I think at the other end of the spectrum, I've been looking at property portals in Southeast Asia and visiting them for more than 15 years, even in my NASPA days. And I think what we have underestimated throughout that period is quite how long it takes to build something, and how long it takes to get to revenue materiality. And of course, part of that reason is because we've taken the Western model and tried to make it work here, and spent a lot of time realizing that it needs to be translated and adapted. The fact that there are also, I think that's the first point. The second point is that we've underestimated quite how important Facebook has become in these markets. I think in many established markets, portals had already become quite big. If you can remember, there was a time before Facebook and Instagram were large. I think already you saw some of the portals going back to even before the beginning of the 21st century, not 20th century. So I think those are important things to bear in mind. I think a lot of the points I made on my sort of compare and contrast slide, emerging markets, established markets, I think you've all helped to confirm them during the past 2 days, and I'm grateful for that. And I think, you know, the importance of new developments, you can't underestimate it. If you want to make money in these markets, you have to have a solution for developers. And either you have to be working directly with developers. Like, you know, it's a shame Zameen wasn't here this time. I think what they've done, everyone can learn from. It's not always as easy as they make it sound, because they had, if you remember, the combination of traffic dominance plus going to the developers very early on. But I think I can't emphasize enough how important it is to have a solution with developers. Either you get them to work with you directly on a subscription model, or hopefully on a commission share. And if you can't, then think of ways you can support your agents so that they then become more successful with developers.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. The other thing that is clear about these markets is the volatility of them. Zameen in Pakistan at the moment, you know, in many ways, if you think of, many of you know the Zameen story, but if you look at it at the moment, I had a good chat with Imran Ali Khan, who's the founder in Madrid. We were having a chat, and I've known Zameen for a very long time. Yeah. And one of the interesting challenges they've got is it's gone from being this incredibly open, vibrant, you know, the Pakistani market, rapid growth, they could get dividends, pay them out, and so on, to suddenly there's a coup, or well, not a coup, well, there's who knows what it is, but there's a whole lot of political unrest. The Prime Minister, Imran Khan, has been thrown in prison, and what's happened suddenly overnight is, and it's affected Zameen quite dramatically, is that there was a market that relied a lot on foreign expat money coming in. That's dried up. Yep. You can't send a penny out. You've got to find some sort of dodgy way to do it. And that's immediately put massive pressure on Zameen. They've had to lay off staff just to keep the nose above water. And for all intents and purposes, and if you're like a Frontier Digital Ventures, for example, and you hold 30% of the equity in the business, it's actually worth zero today.
Or negative, even.
Well, you could basically write it off because you can't sell it. There's no buyer. You can't get any dividends out from it. It's just, you're just stuck in this loop.
But it's all timing, right? Because one assumes these issues correct themselves, and it could be in 3 years' time, it's an incredibly valuable asset. So
yes, it could be.
But again, that compounds the challenges you have in these markets, right? You have, you have the low average selling price. You have unstructured developers, unstructured brokerage markets, which means it's harder to get them to appreciate the great things you're doing with the portal. And then in some of these markets, you also have a lot of political and or currency risks. And that adds up to a lot of headwinds.
Yes. What's next on your list?
So, well, I was going to say us consultants need to get a better quote than the long-term, short-term one, as that seems to be overused now. But actually, one of the things that struck me most, I mean, I've been to 5 marketplaces-oriented conferences, ours and Simon's, over the last year, and each time I see the AI presentations, and I'm just amazed at how much in the space of one conference it's moved on. And I think now I am fundamentally a believer that within 5 years, we will see a very different approach to search, that AI is going to really disrupt how it works. And, you know, Malcolm's point that you've made before as well about how that disrupts the business model for traditional portals is really very significant. And I'm just, you know, increasingly a believer that the long term is not that far away in this particular case. You know, it's software, and we can see the pace at which it develops.
I think you're completely right. And I think the interesting question then is, to what extent will those, I don't want to get into a quibble on how we're measuring organic, but when we're talking about traffic from Google, which I think is the amount of the traffic which is obviously at risk here, and that is, I think, roughly 50% for iMove and 80% for housing.com. That's the really interesting bit, right? Because that is the sort of the force of gravity which is helping you guys at the moment. And I think it's in a way, I was surprised and delighted to see that both Scout and Rightmove, since we first talked about this in Miami 9 months ago, they've been working really hard to start to change search. It's a long way away from where I think we both think it will be in 3 to 5 years' time, but it shows that they agree it's a problem, they have to fix it.
Yeah, and my view on that is that we've had the seismic move from print to online. Yeah. That was clearly seismic. It was clearly an revolution. Yeah. Everything else has been evolution. Yeah. AI is another revolution. Yeah. Is the way I'm thinking about it. And the only thing, and the thing that and I was, who was I talking to? I was talking to Ed and Harvey. We're doing a podcast before. And the thing we always forget is that someone like a Rightmove and an REA didn't happen overnight. We may feel like it was overnight, but they did start at like 96, 97, 1996, 97, and they really took off maybe a decade later. Right? Wow. Yeah. And that was, you know, they were getting momentum and moving forward, but then they took off, and that was when they went past the print and so on. And I think we've got to be careful that we're only 1 or 2 years into the real application of AI to what we're doing, and we had a bit of a debate about, you know, will people change their search behavior? Well, if I'm looking for an apartment to rent somewhere, I don't want to be given I don't want to spend 10 days looking for the damn thing. I just want to know what's available for the 1 year I need it in the rough location. If you can do all that work and just give me one that I can press a button and it is available and I can book it, I'm going to do that. I might spend longer searching for the home of my dreams, but there are many other valid use cases in the real estate world.
I've got a slide of that in the presentation, which you'll all get. I think the shortcut search, show me my 5 favorite apartments that fit my criteria, and I think in my case I did Mumbai search. I just, who will be satisfied with those 5 ones which come up, right? It just begs the question: how are they selected? Are they within, how many parameters can they fit in my complex search? I think it will take some time for that to work. I think that kind of immediate search gratification will happen for low involvement stuff, but I think we'll need to see more have to see more proof of complexity of all those multivariants in your search really being proven in the results before we start to think that this is actually working for me as a user.
So I wonder if it's slightly different from those kind of views. I wonder if it's actually more about an ability to interact to get very fast to the right result. So, we live in an environment where you're saying, I like this, this, and this. You're getting a few things to see. You're saying, oh, I like that one. It's zooming down. You say, go back to that. Can we go into that house and look at the kind of it in a bit more detail? And it's the speed of ability to interact in a very, accurate and descriptive way. I mean, that's kind of what I wonder. One other point. I mean, one of the slides I photographed today was your one of the brand, going out into different environments.
Yes.
And
by the way, it was a very bad slide, but yes.
Well, it's a good concept, even if it was a bad slide.
Okay,
and I, what strikes me is I wonder whether we're going to see, almost in the way that WeChat is a separate internet in China, whether we're going to see, some of these environments like OpenAI, ChatGPT, or its future evolutions become, immersive environments in which, other players have to operate in an integrated way. And I guess there's that question of do you stop, as you say, it's no longer a destination. Do you stop owning the destination and you have to be in a multitude of destinations in a very interactive AI-based fashion? So, those are that's how I kind of begin to think about what this looks like in 4 or 5 years' time.
I agree with you, and I think it does come down to brand.
Yeah.
Think about news and information at the moment, and it doesn't matter what the topic is, you're bombarded left, right, and center with people's opinion, news articles, etc., and you have no idea whether it's true or not true. And then you keep going back to, well, who do I trust? AAP, BBC, New York Times, or whatever, right? And then what was interesting is what popped up today on my BBC feed was now available on WhatsApp. So they're now saying, I'm taking BBC to WhatsApp. So now it's one of my chats, and it's going to pop up with articles on it, and I can then, I assume, I don't know, I haven't played with it yet, I'll be able to engage with it somehow. So I think what the interesting challenge now is, and I know Zillow, I think, spent a lot of money trying to doing brand beyond searching for homes. Maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago now. And I think there's a way in which if you can position yourself as the trusted search for real estate, for whatever the need is, you can start to get towards this limited list of giving you 5, because I know it's coming from someone I trust. Okay? You think about how at the moment there are a lot of people. There are a lot of people who are literally putting their trust in influencers.
I think for a $500,000 home, there's not many influencers I would trust.
Okay. No, but remember, we are.
And why are they influencing on that property? There's a reason, right?
Okay, gentlemen, just hate to remind you, we're the wrong side of 50. Okay,
just
right. And there's, I think, the other side of other side of 50, the younger. The 48's young. The younger side of 50 are the ones that start to view this very differently. Okay, and I think let's not underestimate the capacity for, as Jonathan's talking about, of search really changing.
Yeah.
And we may just wake up in a few years to go, well, how did this all change? And I think we're living through a bit of a revolutionary stage at the moment. We're just at the very beginning of it.
Look, I think there's this utility of choice, right? Having too much choice that actually stymies you in decision making, and I think we're going to see a lot of that going away with our give me X, book me Y kind of culture, which we're going to move into.
Yes.
I think
Yes.
in terms of how you think about what you need to do, one of the key things it strikes me is that the specialist LLMs that the Rightmoves, etc., will create, trained on their own data, stuff they've got uniquely and exclusively, etc., and the history of user experience and so on, I think that genuinely will add an edge that the Googles can't get at in terms of property search and what it needs to be. And I think one of the big pieces of thinking that portals need to do is what data do I really need to acquire, and what can I get actually exclusively and lock off in a way that will be useful to these kind of experiences. And how do I make sure that all of the information around customer buyer and seller behavior I'm capturing in a way that I can then get value out of when I begin to train my own pet ATM LLM.
And I think if you are a dominant portal like we've seen the ones with the very high relative market shares, then if you can combine that traffic dominance and use it to pull in more data, and I'm not just talking about static data about objects, but also how different individuals react on the website and the information that gives you, and then you populate with, let's call it the static third-party data about pricing and neighborhoods and so on, you start to have an edge, and if you can then use that to further make your portal the center for property search. I think the challenge is if you're in an earlier stage market where so much more content is on Facebook or on other platforms, you have to work twice as hard. And it may make more sense to go harder on getting more of the content, even if it's at the price of not being able to charge so much subscriptions, because later on it'll give you a much stronger data play.
Yep. Can we bring up, excuse me, Bea, can we bring up the questions? Thank you.
Can I have one more point on this, which
yes.
is, what is it?
You're bringing it up.
The point about data and data collection, one thing that struck me, and it came out a couple of times, I think, is that just what you get passively from your site is not enough to feed good AI. And actually, another of the real advantages existing players at scale have is the ability to begin to create conversations with their users and enhance the data they have due to the scale and the relationships they have. And that would be something very hard for others to replicate. And there have been a couple of mentions of GDPR and so on. I personally don't believe that's an issue at all. I think consumers will readily give their consent to have the right kind of experience here. So I kind of think the data privacy issues will just go away. But the more you begin early on to build your profile of your consumers and have those conversations, that's another ream of data that you can build that is an asset in this world.
Yeah. I think another likely, it's a bit of a takeaway, a bit of an outcome of thinking about this, is that we talk about personalization of the search experience, but we're talking about a very basic level, and I think we'll get to a point one day where if there is a search, if three of us do a search, the same search in the same suburb against the same listings, those same listings will be presented to us in a different way, not only order, but the way they actually present the listing will be different. So I might see the pool, you might see the backyard, and you might see
that's already happening. I mean, that's already happening in search on some sites. So, I think, that's absolutely inevitable.
So it becomes that next level of customization, because the real game here is how do you remain the most relevant source of information that gets to the destination I want. And the portal has to be moving with the time. The industry has to be moving with the time. There's a question here, right? Can the industry prepare for the inevitable Elon Musk, Steve Jobs of real estate, bringing a total disruptive model to an industry via AI, AR, VR?
By definition, not, right? If it's going to be totally disruptive, it has to have an element of surprise, doesn't it?
Yes.
But more than that, what's the thing you're most afraid of that you haven't thought of, kind of question. I think that I do believe in network effects. All my business is around network effect businesses, and I generally believe that portals that have established network effects, which means they've got most of the demand and most of the supply, are incredibly difficult to dislodge as long as they continue to deliver a proper experience for their users, whether they're 25 or 55.
Okay.
I think I think portals have to be prepared to disrupt their own business model somewhere along the line, and the risk will come to them if new emerging business models do absolutely disrupt the commercial approach, and they don't tackle that and they don't deal with it. So I think you've got to think about those kind of things. And generally on the question, I think, yes, you can do lots to prepare, in terms of building data, piloting, building experience, and using your existing, leverage to really build assets ahead of time.
Yeah. I think the one thing when you look at when you look at hyper disruptive plays, whether it's like at the iPhone or whatever it is, right? That the iPhone in that example can be purchased by anyone on the planet. It's the same iPhone, right? Yeah. So it's a vanilla ice cream sold to everyone on the planet. Real estate is not vanilla. That's the problem, right? And how it's sold and how it's executed in each market is not vanilla.
Lamudi is a good example.
Well, the Lamudi example, which I'm not sure if everyone knows this, but if you go back to the times of Rocket, back in
13, 14.
I thought a bit earlier than that, 12, 13, 14, they raised $1 billion, invested an absolute truckload into a couple of gentlemen who were rolling out Lamudi as being the one-size-fits-all global, basically emerging market and established,
non-established.
Yes, the emerging market and early stage, what do we call the other ones, markets, and it was going to be the panacea for everything. Roll the clock forward about 12, 13 years, and the last assets basically it's all been broken down. It ended up as being 3 markets only: Philippines, Indonesia, and
Mexico.
Mexico, thank you. 2 of which were owned by EMPG, 1 of which was owned by Life Will Connect, and then EMPG ended up selling those last 2, Indonesia and Philippines, onto DCG. So they've had a few owners over the time, and they've gone from all the markets. They've all been closed down and focused. And what we see in that is that at the level of operations, it's super hard. Okay, at the level of the Google-esque type mature Latrovit, it still works, generate a lot of traffic because they're not going to the next level. So if you think about, can someone like a Musk or whatever, right, come in and totally change it? Super hard. Maybe though, the CoStar approach of targeting one market and going hard may work. May work in the US with what they're doing with homes, and probably won't work in the United Kingdom with what they're doing with on the market.
So what I say is, until it really, well, if we're not talking about CoStar, I think CoStar, and we're talking about a mature markets. If CoStar can't seriously disrupt Zillow, then there's no way on the market can disrupt Rightmove. And remember, you've got MLS in the US, which means there's no content advantage. In the UK, there is a content advantage. Rightmove has more listings than on the market. And I think what CoStar does incredibly well is data. This is basically a data company that for more than 2 decades, I think it could be 3 decades, has been compiling data originally about commercial buildings, but then it's gone fully residential as well. And again, if you haven't done so already, look at homes.com. It's got the most amazing granularity of information on it. So I think, but is that disruptive, or does that just spur, a Rightmove to double down and also provide a 90% solution on that?
Well, CoStar doesn't have that data in the UK, and the UK is not an institutional rental market. In the US, you've got this huge ownership by the institutions of the rental base, and that required the kind of services that CoStar's commercial side did.
And you've also got the legal wranglings going on, right? You've got the whole, the fact that Zillow sends you, if you're clicking on a listing contact agent, you're actually being sent to a buyer agent, not to the listings agent. So I think there's so many reasons why Europe will be more difficult for Andy, but maybe he'll tell us how it's going in at Madrid or wherever it is.
I know, we'll see. He may turn up on a podcast somewhere soon. Now, and I think the other important point that came up, and Georg talked about it, which was all around influencers and the role of influencers. And I thought that was a very interesting angle, because it does really highlight the fact that agents are in many ways influencers, and how can the marketplace and how can PropTech help power an influencer in this segment. What REW is doing with their Real Tours product is a super interesting way of approaching influencers. I think the point here by Javier is a good point, is they're already very powerful influencers in markets, but like this Ryan Serrant, or whatever his name is. Clearly, I don't follow him, but he must, have influence.
So look, $1 million listing, is a great show. I think that influencers can play an incredibly important role, but would I simply take my 3 recommendations from ChatGPT, apartment A, B, and C, recommended by influencer A, B, and C, and be done with it? Probably not, right? So part of the marketing mix helps to widen the field of potential buyers, but will that be my trusted representative with whom I'll say, okay, because Ryan thinks it's a good deal, therefore I'm going to buy it? That for me is more difficult.
The thing is, he's not an influencer turned into a broker, it's a broker turned into an influencer.
Yeah.
So people trust him.
Yep. Can you unpack those thoughts about organic traffic? Been a lot of SEO instability this year. What do you think will happen if portals lose significant organic traffic? Will users adapt and come direct, or will it create room for a competitive reset?
Well, actually, I think it'll help the number one, absolutely. And you can see, with Rightmove, the 90% combination of organic and direct traffic. I think 40% of that or so is direct, and I think that will increase, and the brand will just help. So I think it shifts the competitive dynamic further in favor of the leaders.
And we haven't talked enough about app, right? Because you usually have, when you analyze the traffic of a large portal, most people just see the world of similar web, right? Which is by definition just web desktop, if that still exists, plus web mobile. But what you'll find is, 20% of your uniques, or maybe only 10%, are also app users, and they are super users, and they'll be on 2-3 times a day. And that is the ultra valuable traffic, because those are the close to buying ones. And I think those are the users who you have to get hold of if you want to disrupt. And those are the ones you're going to really look after if you're an incumbent defendant.
Yep. Let's look at, we're going to run out of time sooner or later. Wild question here, maybe not so wild. Do you see in some foreseeable future the portals will no longer be relevant if ChatGPT will be able to integrate property searches on its own?
I'm skeptical. I think the fact that the big players, the Googles, etc., will go after the biggest markets for them, the ones that aren't locally differentiated. They hate dealing with individual local areas. And I think in the time that happens, the sophisticated abilities built in AI by the portals will actually put them in a position to carry on leading.
Remember, the LLM bit is the easy bit. It sounds a bit trite, and I think it was a little bit what Mike was saying earlier. The difficult bit is getting hold of the right content, original content, and whoever has that will have plenty of LLMs they can plug in to use to add value from that content. So I'm still back in the mantra that the content is king in this business.
Okay, I'm going to take a slightly different view. I think if I had 1 million interns working for me and I applied them all to the problem here of how do I build content, because building content is easy. Matula did it, Trovit did it, right? It's not actually hard. It's about the monetization of that content. It's about driving of the traffic to that content. Yeah. They're the harder questions to solve. Now, if I've got 1 million interns, i.e. a lot of AI just working on that problem, if you take the elements, you take what Trovit and Matula have done about getting content. You take what Mike was talking about in terms of long tail search. You have AI-driven landing page automatic creation to go after those millions, billions, whatever the damn number was, of searches per month that are never asked before, a lot of which...
150 million,
in real estate, so you target them for traffic. And then you have these AI engines going after agents, but in a non-verbal way, but but communicating them and saying, here's your listing, here's your traffic, click here to upgrade, click here to do this. You might end up generating a fair chunk of audience and outcome through that model with literally a team of 4 or 5 people and a whole bunch of interns working for you. Why not? Why not try something totally different?
I think, clearly there's a risk in there, but I think the content is only one part of it. And I think what you have as a portal is the ability to build a whole set of information out of your customer base through interactions with AI that isn't simply available to the Googles, etc., that sits behind your own wall. And you've got a period of time in which you can do that before the big guys kind of get interested in these markets.
But I think the big guys are going to be Luddites in this. Because I think they've got so much wrapped up into their current models, their current processes, their current bureaucracies. And I know a bunch of people here who've been negotiating with some of these big companies, and they can't get. And someone was telling me yesterday, I don't even want to say who it was. They were trying to get like a $10,000 deal through a large company with hundreds of millions of revenue, and the person, I can't make a decision. I've got to go up the tree for $10,000. So how are you going to be nimble and effective against that? Remember these AI engines are going to be like ants crawling all over the outcome, and I'm getting excited here, right? I'm thinking that there is an absolute opportunity here just to do something different. Remember, you don't have to have 300 million revenue like Domain or 900 million from Australia like REA to be a super interesting company. What if you get to 10 or 20 and your cost base is 2?
I think the question is, can you overcome the audience and content disadvantage, right? Because the best company to add value through AI to how individuals are interacting when they're looking at property is the right moves and the REAs, right? But if they're too slow about it, then the question is, could a smaller player, by being so clever about how they're using their understanding of a smaller subset of interactions, come up with a better way of selling property?
Why are they the best ones to do it?
Because they have the data. Because if you just think how much you learn from knowing how many clicks a user has made before they contacted an agent. How many other properties did they look at? Have they already clicked on this property 4 times? There's just so much information.
But remember, a user is not a repeat visitor. A user is going to be repeat for a very short period of time. It's not like it's not like I'm going to Amazon as a frequent shopper that I am, and I'm going there at least once a week, 52 weeks in a year.
But I think you learn a huge amount about similarities between users, cohorts, all of those kind of things.
But I reckon you can learn that super fast.
So that's the big question. And it comes down to data. So my hypothesis is that that pattern recognition, which is so valuable in terms of determining the value of a lead, that pattern recognition is something which can be done relatively quickly if you have the volume of data of an ImmoScout or a Rightmove. I don't know whether you can get 60, 50, or 40% of the way there if you're trying to do it based upon much smaller data sets.
But you look at something like a Trover and Matula, right? They've built big audiences with the same level of interaction at the high level.
But you've got much... But I don't know what level of sophistication you went to in the analysis of each individual click stream.
No, we didn't.
Right.
But now you can, right? Because the data is there.
Yeah.
Anyway, the point is that if you think, my point is, can you think about the problem differently and legitimately and not in the paradigm of how things currently are? Yeah. And if you can do that, which goes back to the disruption, right? The point you made, right? And this is how I think maybe you can think about it differently. Okay, just throwing it out there. Okay, and I need to have a chat to Niels about his million interns. Can I order 2 million interns, please? Okay, working for me. Okay, thank you very much, guys, for sharing your thoughts about the conference and helping us wrap it up. I hope everyone here found that interesting, to have a conversation about some of the things that we've seen come out of it. And clearly what it's going to do is spark debate and interaction and get everyone prepared for the next conference that's coming up at the end of this year in Europe, venue to be determined, based on America's Cup and a few other things that are making it a bit more challenging. But I think we will then have a very interesting next perspective on what's happening, because as you said, Jonathan, it's moving so fast.
It is.
So thank you very much, Jonathan. Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much, Malcolm,
Thank you.
for helping out, close out the conference.
Very welcome.